Today I want to discuss with you some updated information on the real possibility of the Pittsburgh Penguins trading star center Evgeni Malkin. Where might he go and what might the deal look like? Plus, I also have some information to discuss on some potential moves by the Vancouver Canucks. We'll get into all the latest coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams. So if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned, we had some very interesting NHL trade rumors to discuss today, including Penguins star forward Evgeni Malkin. You're definitely going to want to watch this video all the way through to get all this information. It's certainly some very interesting stuff and could change the landscape of the NHL for a number of teams here if something like this were to go down. First, I just want to quickly touch on a few quick notes here for the Vancouver Canucks, and then we'll get into the latest on Evgeni Malkin. Now, the information on the Canucks comes from Sportsnet, and it kind of indicates what they expect the Canucks to do and things they might be looking to do here with some team sources. Now, of course, they do have a lot of cap space in Vancouver, which is a good thing. They really don't have a ton of contracts that need to be looked after. Obviously, one of the big ones, though, is Blockbuster. He's one of their top forwards, proven to be a great goal scorer so far, is a restricted free agent and needs a new contract. So obviously he needs to be looked after, and they'll need to decide if they're going to retain veteran defenseman Alex Edler or not. Obviously he's a UFA now come July 1, and I know that there was a lot of interest from him to remain with the Canucks, and we have to see if they get that worked out or whatever. But really, overall, not a ton of contracts to be looked after. They do have some other RFAs, but it is possible that some of them may not be retained, so they may become UFAs. Or they very well might look to trade some of them before they have to get to that qualifying offer point here. So now let's take a look at some of the players that the Canucks likely might try to move on from this summer. Now, a couple of buyout candidates would be Tim Schaller and Ryan Spooner. Both have 1 year left on their deal. Of course, Ryan Spooner was a well-traveled player last year, bounced around for a few teams, never really found a good spot to really make some serious contributions and kind of get settled in. So it's quite a possibility he could be bought out and become a UFA. Of course, Tim Schaller is one of the big free agents that they signed last year. They spent a lot of money on what looked like was going to be a fourth line combo here between Schaller, Antoine Roussel, as well as Jay Beagle. And Schaller, I think out of the three, probably worked out the least amongst them. So there is a possibility with 1 year left on this deal along with Spooner, they could be potential buyout candidates in order to free up some cap space here to make some other moves. It also seems quite possible they'd be very interested in trading our RFA forwards Nikolai Goldobin and Marcus Granlund. Now, the article I referenced is from Sportsnet indicates that they feel that there's maybe not a real big trade market for those guys, so it's quite possible that trading them might prove difficult, but there's certainly players that the Canucks would certainly appear interested in moving on from. And of course, you get veterans Louis Eriksson and Brandon Sutter as well. Now, Sutter is probably the least likely out of the bunch. He very well, could be retained. Louis Eriksson, of course, will be very difficult to trade. That contract he has with his lack of production is not going to make it easy. Of course, we did discuss the possibility before about maybe a swap between the Canucks and Oilers for Lucic for Eriksson and bad contracts. Hard to say if anything will ever come from that, but something that would be the type of deal they'd have to make. So one bad contract for another, if that were ever to happen. But it's just players that the Canucks would certainly be interested in moving on from. And of course, what they'd want to do with their cap space that they have now and any other potential cap space they can free up here by maybe moving on from some of these guys would be to go after some potential other RFAs from other teams that are cash strapped and don't have much salary cap space to re-sign them. We're talking about teams like the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Winnipeg Jets, the Vegas Golden Knights, etc. They have a lot of key players that need new contracts and they don't have a ton of space to do it. So whether or not they go to the offer sheet route or whether or not they try to make trades with these teams to take advantage of the situation, sometimes you can get a decent player off a roster like that and not have to give up as much because the team needs to move them to free up the space to sign another player. So whether or not they go after like a Braden Point or a Jacob Trouba or any of those guys, or maybe talk to Toronto about some of their forwards like an Andreas Janssen, Kasperi Kapanen, or any of those guys. Either way, they have a variety of options, and the Canucks management and ownership seems to be willing to put some money into the team here to kind of get them back closer to being a playoff team. One other quick note as well, they did indicate that RFA defenseman Derek Pouliot would not be tendered a qualifying offer, so he won't be back. He'll become a UFA. See if he can find himself a fresh start somewhere else, but that might prove difficult as well. So when it comes to the Canucks this offseason, certainly expected to be having a lot of trade conversations with these other teams that are in a cap crunch to see what they can take advantage of to make improvements on their roster for next year. Now let's jump into the more interesting piece of today's video, Evgeni Malkin. Now, of course, we've discussed this before, and of course, I cautioned you at that point that I thought it was a long shot that it happened. I'm still not convinced that it's going to be a high odds of it happening, but it seems as though the odds are increasing all the time here. We've had more and more information from a variety of different sources indicating that these trade rumors are indeed real. Of course, a rumor is just a rumor until something happens. Doesn't mean it's going to, but the fact that the Penguins are having internal serious conversations about it and possibly having discussions with other teams really does show that it's a move that they're seriously considering making. I want to reference an article here today that I'm going to go through with you to kind of show you a real possibility of a deal that we might see happen between the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Florida Panthers. So let's put the article up here on the screen and go through some of the key points. It indicates, for the first time in Evgeni Malkin's career, the trade rumors are real. In the early days of the budding Penguins core, centered on Evgeni Malkin and Sidney Crosby, there was some talk the Penguins would choose to keep Jordan Staal as a second center. That was not the case. As the legend suggests, the Penguins turned down a king's ransom for Malkin by several teams, including the LA Kings, who were trying to get back to the star power of the 1990s. However, the talk is now legitimate. Pittsburgh Hockey Now spoke with sources close to the Penguins front office and around the league. Sources said the Florida Panthers are interested in Malkin for several reasons, and the Penguins are genuinely considering a Malkin trade. The trade talk is not a bluff. Malkin told a Russian reporter at the IIHF World Championships, "I'm used to the talks, I'm get traded, so it doesn't get me nervous. Now I'm with Team Russia, and I'll try to prove I'm good." Obviously, Malkin feels the need here, maybe at the World Championships, to kind of reprove himself yet again that he's still a top productive player with Team Russia at the World Championships. So we'll see how that tournament goes for him. From the Florida side, they are widely reported to be interested in UFA Artemi Panarin. Adding a Malkin-Panarin punch to their lineup would go a long way to making Florida competitive again. It would also add legitimate star power, which some in Florida believe could sell tickets and revive a struggling fan base. Florida was 30th of 31 teams in attendance this season. They averaged only 13,261 fans per game, but the numbers of visiting fans and seat giveaways pad that total. Florida hasn't ranked higher than 22nd in attendance since 2012-13. Also, having Malkin, 32, already on the roster would help lure the Russian-born Panarin as well. And it's a poorly kept secret that coaches and management were unhappy with Malkin's attitude this year. Sources told Pittsburgh Hockey Now some in the Penguins front office believe the round one squash by the New York Islanders was proof the Penguins need a seismic shift in their core to extend their championship window with Sidney Crosby. Not even Malkin was happy with his season. There appears to be a fluid nature to the current feelings. One conversation with Malkin could cement belief things must change, or one conversation could quell the situation. A couple of facts have become clear. The Penguins have not made a final decision, as perhaps even they are struck by the enormity of the situation and are varied opinions within the front office and Penguins hierarchy regarding how sweeping the changes should be for next season. Malkin also has a no movement clause and would have a voice regarding if or where he goes. Pittsburgh Hockey Now believes the price for Malkin is a high-scoring forward, a prospect, and a first-round pick. Circle Florida forward Jonathan Hubereau. Sources mention his name, but it's unclear if Florida or Pittsburgh used his names in discussions. The 25-year-old Hubereau was drafted as a center, but made his mark as a point-producing left winger who potted 30 goals and 92 points this season. Now, just to add to that, take you back to this year's NHL trade deadline. Of course, the Florida Panthers and the Pittsburgh Penguins did pull off a trade. We saw Nick Bukestad and Jared McCann end up in Pittsburgh, but during those trade talks, there was a lot of rumors that Jonathan Hubereau's name was being brought up as a potential trade chip by the Florida Panthers, and that the Penguins were showing a lot of interest. Now, I know Jonathan Hubereau's played a big role with the Florida Panthers, but if they could move him and bring in Malkin and Panarin, I'm quite sure they would get that done. Obviously, if the package going to Pittsburgh is close to what this article references here, I think Jonathan Hubereau, a 92-point player, throw in Florida's first-round pick in either 2019 or 2020, depending on when the deal goes down, and one of their top prospects, maybe like an Alexei Heponiemi, for example, would be another top-scoring forward. They also do have some interesting defensive prospects, too. Maybe an Owen Tippett's another one. So either way, if the Penguins could get Hubereau, another top-scoring forward or defenseman, either way like a nice young prospect and a first-round pick, I think that's likely a deal they would do. They'd also free up cap space to boot because Huberdeau's contract is a fair bit cheaper than Malkin's. He's also younger. From the Pittsburgh side of things, I would certainly consider doing this. I mean, Malkin is still an excellent player. He certainly provides, a 1-2 punch with Sidney Crosby that is second to none in the NHL. But at the same time, the current core is just not getting it done. They've got a couple years now of disappointing playoff performances after back-to-back championships. I don't think they'd ever trade Sidney Crosby. It was always believed that Malkin would be the one to go if it ever came to that. Like I said, there was even speculation years ago that they were going to trade Malkin and keep Jordan Staal, which obviously turned out not to be the case, and was likely, I'm sure we can all agree here, was the right move. Jordan Staal is a good hockey player, but he's certainly no Evgeni Malkin, and that's no slight to Staal, but that's certainly a fair statement, I do believe. So obviously this type of trade, they believe, would also increase the likelihood that Florida would be able to land Artemi Panarin in free agency. The Panthers have also been linked to Sergei Bobrovsky. Of course, the Blue Jackets were just beat out here in the playoffs by the Bruins the other night. Bobrovsky and Panarin both asked about their future. They remain very vague like they did since the preseason. And based on comments from Jarmo Kekalainen, the general manager of the Blue Jackets, he said basically he wanted players who wanted to be part of the community, who wanted to be Blue Jackets, who would bleed the blue. And then that kind of just led me to think that he's kind of referencing the fact that Bobrovsky and Panarin just are not interested. As much as they kind of like the team, they don't like the whole aspect of being a Columbus Blue Jacket player and being in that community, that they want personal for personal reasons, would rather play elsewhere. So I think they're probably as good as gone, in my opinion, and the Panthers probably stand as good a chance as any right now in landing them, but they will certainly have some competition, I do believe, from other teams. You can probably throw the Rangers into the mix, especially when it comes to Panarin, but if they really insist on going as a package deal, Florida probably would make the most sense. The Florida Panthers would certainly have to probably make some other moves as well. I know when it comes to Roberto Luongo and James Reimer, one of those two would have to go. Is it possible Luongo could end up on LTIR next year? I know he's had a ton of injury problems. Could he come to camp, maybe not pass the physical, and end up on LTIR for the year so they get cap relief that way? Maybe they trade Luongo or Reimer. Of course, like Malkin, Luongo does have a form of a no-trade clause as well, so that complicates things. But it's hard to say how this all goes, but the Panthers look to be making sweeping changes, trying to revive that franchise. The Florida Panthers have struggled to get into the playoffs on any kind of a consistent basis. Their attendance numbers haven't been great either, like this article references. They appear to be very, very serious about making some significant changes to improve all that, and obviously landing a player like Malkin, Panarin, Bobrovsky would certainly all go a very long way to making that happen. So, of course, the other thing to keep in mind, like this article references, this is not a guarantee this is going to happen, but it does look, though, for the first time in Malkin's career, the trade rumors are real. There is something to it. So, of course, as always, we do these videos for discussion purposes to get your thoughts and opinions to kind of continue the conversation here. So tell me what you think down in the comment section, and we can continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel here, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, subscribe for more videos just like this one. Thank you very much for watching. I will catch you next time.